I'm the Grub Street Lodger, and it's been September. And usually this is where I say, well, September, I'm back at work, I haven't read as much. Actually, I read quite a lot this month, and it's for a weird reason. So let me look at my calendar, the 15th of September, I was going to review a play. It was an opera in Belarusian. I thought, let's read the book this was based on, and that'll give me a handle on it. And it looks good. So I ordered that round about 20th of August, and they said it'll be here definitely by the 28th of August. Well, it came by the 11th of September, and then I had to sort of crash read it. And so as a result, I was reading lots and lots of short books whilst waiting for it, because any day it could have turned up at my door, and I would want to start it quick. So I've got a lot of very short books, and let's get started. So the first one I read was called Living Dead Girl, and it's by Elizabeth Scott. And I read this because it was kind of recommended as something that was impactful. And, I mean, it is impactful, but it's horrible. It's a deeply unpleasant book. It's narrated by a girl who's known as Alice. That's not her real name. We find out her real name at the end. And Alice was kidnapped at the age of 9 by just a monster, really. He's not just a paedophile, he's a murdering arsonist. No, he's just the worst piece of work. And he regularly rapes her, and also babies her, really. So that kind of horrible sentimentality. Yeah, he keeps saying about how he looks after her and he keeps her, good and young and innocent at the same time. Yeah, he's raping her and things. And now she feels herself as the living dead girl. She's just waiting to die, but she doesn't have the bravery to do it. And she's also hitting a deadline, really. She's gone through puberty. She eats very little, so it's not very obvious. And she, waxes herself, and she tries to hide the fact, essentially, that she's gone through puberty. But she knows her time is coming up. And he killed the last version of her and burnt down the house of the parents. And she's worried he's going to burn down her parents' house, including her little sister. And so when he says, right, find me the next one, and we can raise her together, she's like, okay. And so the book is about her looking for her replacement, looking at kids and trying to assess how abductable they are. It's deeply unpleasant, and as such, I found it very hard to sort of work out what I think of this book, because it wants to be deeply unpleasant, and it's successful in being deeply unpleasant, but it's deeply unpleasant enough, But as I said, I was recommended it because I was told it was impactful, and it is impactful, so it does that. It's just, I don't want to read many more books like that. Thank you. So the next book I read was a lot nicer. It's called Cyrano. It's by Geraldine McCaughrean, and it's essentially a novelised version of the play Cyrano de Bergerac. Now, I've got a bit of a thing with Cyrano de Bergerac because I was when the Royal Shakespeare Company tour. If the kid roles are small ones, they just get a new kid in each town. So I was the kid in Cambridge when they toured Cyrano de Bergerac in about 1998. And Anthony Sher was Cyrano, and it was a really good time for me. Also, I fell in love with the play, and I still love the play. There's something about the romanticism of it, and not really the whole love note element of the romanticism, but the idea of the panache. The idea of living big and magnanimous and generous and funny and giving and all that. It's for me the big key moment of the play, right at the end, when Cyrano is dying and he stands up and he fights the ghosts of pettiness and small-mindedness and all this. And he says, I've lost everything. There's one thing I haven't lost, my panache. And then he dies. And it always gets to me. And it got to me in this book, even though, look, it's not a very long book. I don't think it's written for kids. I'm not sure. I don't really get the point of this book. It's a watered down version of Cyrano de Bergerac. You know, a lot of the times in the play where you hear their witty remarks and things, she just says, "Oh, they spoke so wittily," and then moves on. It's got a few nice little phrases and a few good little bits, and it's pleasant to read. You know, I pretty much read it on a bus journey, and it made the bus journey a nice place, but there's not a lot more to it. So then I moved on to Joe Orton, Between Us Girls. Now, I was in a production of Loot when I was at university, and that led me to read Prick Up Your Ears, and I watched the film, and I watched the play version with, I think it was Matt Lucas being Halliwell. And so when I saw this at the Swipe books, and so, oh, it's one of Joe Orton's novels that was never published. Okay. And it's about this woman who is tricked into becoming a prostitute in Mexico, escapes and becomes a famous actress, which was what she wanted in the first place, and then realizing that being an actress, she's making crap films, and so she quits that and retires and has a very nice time. And it's weird. It's a bit like drag, you know, because he's narrating as this woman. But it's like drag in the sense that there's an element of drag which is gay men taking a piss out of women, which is uncomfortable, and I don't like it. Like, oh look, this weird, monstrous, screeching harpy creature I've turned myself into. That's what woman is. This is you. Yeah, there's an element of that, and he's doing that a bit. But at the same time, there is a warmth as well. So he's sort of taking the piss of this poor woman, because she's so stupid she doesn't even realise what's happening to her half the time. But she's also very lively and fun, and she gets the happy element, the happy ending that Joe Orton never did. And it's a good book in the sense that it's zippy fun. A lot of these books I read were, you know, because I knew that other book was going to be on my doorstep, and so I just wanted to read fun, quick things, and that was one, and it was good. My eyes keep flicking around today, don't they? I look shifty. Oh well. Next book was The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique Bauby, and it's a memoir. A man had a stroke or a seizure, and that led to him having locked-in syndrome. He couldn't use any part of his body really except a slight wobble of the head and his left eye. And so in the end he and the therapist work out a communication system with his left eye, and he dictated this memoirs with his left eye. Now, I'd seen the film, and I remember it being kind of horrifying and very, very sad, you know, because this man just loses everything. But the tone of the book is not like that, because apart from anything else, the film sort of goes through it in chronological order. But the book starts off with sort of a life in the day of. So we now see he's got a routine and he's got a semblance of life. He's got something. And then a lot of the book is about how he uses his imagination to, you know, eat. He's French. He likes food. To eat new things and all this kind of thing. The weirdest part of it was probably that I don't think I would have liked Jean-Dominique Bauby if I'd met him. Not after the stroke, because the communication was so slow and difficult. You wouldn't get as much personality out of it. But before it, he's very privileged and very aware of that privilege. And that adds to the tragedy in that he had a lot and he lost a lot. It also means that I don't think he would have liked him if I'd met him before. He died very shortly after the book came out, and it's not as deep as you'd think. Actually, there isn't any deep feeling. Well, there are some deep feelings, but there isn't any sort of deep thoughts about things. He's basically just saying this is what it's like. I'm trapped in a bed. I'm reliant on everybody. I look horrible, but my family are still there for me, and they still show me they love me, and I still show them I love them as best as I can. And I've got my memories to live off, and that's it. So there you go. So next book was The Big Bow Mystery by Israel Zangwill, who was known also as the Dickens of the Ghetto because he wrote a lot of novels with of the ghetto on the people of the ghetto, children of the ghetto, things like that. It's not a mystery about a big bow. It's a mystery set in Bow, which is big. And it's the first lockroom novel. It's trying to say the first lockroom mystery, but no, it isn't. But it's the first lockroom novel. And a man... so the landlady's gone upstairs, and she's noticed the guy who wanted to get up early hasn't got up, and she's worried about him, so she goes to get help from a retired inspector who breaks down the door, and they find that he's dead in there. But nobody's gone in, nobody's gone out. What is it? Spoilers. It's an old book. Skip to next book if... Anyway, spoilers. The inspector did it. So, essentially, as soon as she got him, she sealed his death. Because the inspector, in all his years of solving crime, thought, these criminals are idiots. I could do better than that. So he planned the perfect crime. And so he was just waiting for the landlady to come and get him. And he drugged the guy the night before so he'd sleep in, knowing that the landlady would come and get him for help. And now the landlady has come in. He's broke the door down, quickly stabbed him, and then got her talking. So the body cools down. So when the sort of examiners come, they can't really work out time of death because of when it was written. And it's a really interesting solution to the mystery, but it doesn't quite make sense as character motivation. So the police inspector just wanted to prove how clever he was, eh? And he gets caught out because another man who he respects is accused of the crime and about to be sentenced to hang, and he just can't quite bring himself to let that man hang. And there you go. But really what the book is for fun characters. So most of the book, they're not really dealing with the mystery at all. They're just hanging out and doing things. My favourite character being this hack writer, of course. He claims he's this brilliant poet, and he was always talking about art and beauty and all this kind of stuff. But most of his bylines are in the Real Pork Times. And it's implied he's Jewish as well. So the Real Pork Times is not a prestigious publication for him. And he's really interesting. I like him. And the inspector's hardly in it, because if he was in it, you'd be like, oh, this inspector's not really inspecting. He knows the answer. The landlady's fun. So she's a landlady of this lodging house, and her name is Mrs. Drabdump. And there's a lot of good little jokes like that. It's a good book. It's fun. The next book I read was called The Invention of Morel by Adolfo Bioy Casres. That's what I'm going with. Should have looked it up, really. Anyway, this is a fun little book. So there's a guy, he's being hunted by a very Kafkaesque police. We don't know why exactly, and we don't know where from, but he's essentially wants to get out and hide. And he goes to this deserted island because there's all these rumours about this terrible plague on the island, and he knows nobody's going to come and look for me here. But then there are people there. And it's a bit weird because the island's got a museum, a chapel, a swimming pool, and a generator. So who was there before? But there's just people there, and they're dancing in the museum, and they're swimming in the swimming pool, even though it's now all slimy and covered in frogs, and they're having picnics in the driving rain. And what is going on? And he sees this woman, and he kind of falls in love with her, but he notices there's this other guy who's also sort of following her around. And it turns out it's all because of the invention of Morel. Spoilers here. The invention of Morel is like a photograph, but it takes memories and it projects them. It holds them and projects them perfectly. So it's like having the real people there, with all their thoughts and feelings and memories doing the thing. And so when he was exploring before, our hiding guy, he set it off. And so the projected memories keep happening. And so that's why things are weird, why they're having a picnic in the rain, because when it was originally filmed, there wasn't the rain. And he's falling in love with this woman. And he doesn't really know what to do now, because she's a projection, a memory. And what's more, he learns that everyone who is recorded by this dissolves and dies, and that's the origins of the disease rumours. So all these people are dead, and he decides to film himself inserted into the scenes as if he is this woman's lover, and he doesn't mind dying, and you die by essentially falling apart piece by piece, and he doesn't mind that because eternally in the memory machine he's now part of the action and having a relationship with this woman. Very peculiar, very fun, good book. Next one was called Yesterday. It's wet for some reason. Yesterday, it is by Juan Emar. A lot of these are translated books as well. And it's about what happened yesterday to this couple. So it's weird because it starts off with really big, strange things. So yesterday, he and his wife went to see an execution of a man very unjustly accused, whose execution is utterly botched. And they see that. Then they go to the zoo, and they sing with monkeys to the sun. And then they see there's an escaped lioness, so they climb a tree to hide it. And the lioness attacks an ostrich, and the ostrich swallows the lioness whole, then shits it out, but holds its sphincter tight enough so it skins the lioness as the lioness comes out, and the lioness is all bloody and bedraggled and runs away. So these are all very strange events. And then, as the book goes on, they go to more normal things. They go see a friend who's a painter who talks about green a lot. And then they go to a waiting room. I don't even know what they're waiting for. It doesn't say. But while they're waiting, the man says, we've seen lots of things today, but I haven't made any conclusions. I need to make some conclusions. So he focuses on this fat man, or pot-bellied man. And he can't properly focus on him, because if he focuses on the pot-bellied man as a whole, he keeps sort of zooming in and essentially going into the guy's belly button. It is literal navel gazing, in his mind. But if he starts at the belly button, he finds himself zooming out and taking in the whole of the cosmos. So he can't appreciate the pot-bellied man just as the pot-bellied man is. And he's overthinking it. And then he goes to his parents, and they make a deal with him that I bet you won't look behind the sofa. Now he knows there's probably nothing behind the sofa, but there's a little thought in the back of his mind saying, well, what if there is? And what if it's jelly with lots of legs and burgundy coloured? And the what if means he doesn't do it. And then they go to a pub, but they have tea. I think that's weird, but I think that's just a cultural thing. And then they go home. Oh, no. While they're at the pub, he's having a piss, and he's making circles with it. And then he sees a fly, and he has to decide whether to splash the fly or carry on with the circle. And at that moment, time splits into two ways. The one way splashes the fly and one way doesn't. And he sort of gets this whole grasp of the whole of reality, and it's this amazing revelation to him. But as soon as he's finished his piss and washed his hands, he's kind of forgotten it. So he goes home and tries to remember that revelation and to tell his wife. But every time he remembers the revelation, he then remembers the bit where he washes his hands and forgets, and he has to start over again. And so he's in this infinite recursive loop, and that's where the book ends. It's very strange. It's surprising and fun, and I think really it's about dangers of overthinking and the weird little mental traps we get ourselves into. It's good. I enjoyed it, but very peculiar. And this next book, also wet. I must have splashed these somewhere. Glad I've got plastic on them. It's called The Blue Room, and it's by Hanne Ørstavik. And it's after the Living Dead Girl, probably the grimmest, the second grimmest book I read. So this woman wakes up, and she finds her door is locked. She's like, oh, that's annoying. Because I had plans today. But what we find out is that her plans today were to fly away on a plane with a man, her first boyfriend, and go to America for a bit and then come back. But it was basically her first bit of independence because she lives with her mum, and this was going to be it. And so her, oh, that's annoying, is actually her almost accepting the fact that she is imprisoned. And she is imprisoned. And so the book takes over the course of a day where she's just sort of sitting around, and she could do things to get out. Like there's a window, she could call to someone. There are things she could do, but she doesn't do any of them. She's completely passive. She just waits for her mum to let her out at the end. And in fact, that's the end of the book. Mum letting her out, and she's like, "Oh, that's nice. That's the end of this then." And as she's sitting there, she's remembering about her relationship with this man. So she's a student, and he works in the canteen. And what's special about this relationship is it's her first one, but also it's making her doubt things about her relationship with her mum, who is very, very controlling, and also her friend, who is this pastor who sort of almost helps her mum control her, and so she never fully acknowledges or admits that, but she gets closer, but she never quite gets there. And also she has these intrusive thoughts that just come in throughout the text of really violent S&M sex and rape and just nasty stuff. She obviously equates all sexual things with violence, and so when something slightly sexual happens, she then projects it in her mind into the most violent and unpleasant end. And that this is clearly a sign of how she's being controlled as well, but she never confronts any of it, and we get to the end and she doesn't. And that's, I think, in terms of artistically of the book, that's actually a really interesting way of doing it, and I appreciate it. But the little bit means like, I wanted a happy ending is a bit disappointed, but I think it was the better ending to just leave it open. Is she ever going to learn? Who knows? I expect not. I think it's just going to keep on going. Now, finally, we get to the book that I was waiting for. It's called King Stakh's Wild Hunt. It is by Uladzimir Karatkevich. I practice this as well. Uladzimir Karatkevich. Uladzimir Karatkevich. Oh yeah. If I cut that out, which I'm not going to, I'd look so smart right then. And so it's a Gothic novel, essentially. In fact, it knows it's Gothic novel because it says in it, "Oh, this is a bit like a Radcliffe novel." So there's a very scientifically minded ethnographer, and he wants to collect all of Belarus's tales, and really is a champion of the Belarus is a country of its own with its own culture and its own traditions and things. And he goes off to the middle of nowhere and is taken in a big empty castle called Marshlands, where the last member of a dying rich gentry family is just haunted on all sides by ghosts. There's the Blue Lady and the Little Man, and worst of all, King Stakh's Wild Hunt. Now our guy, he's kind of scientific. He's like, oh, that can't be true. So he searches the truth behind it. It's a bit Hound of the Baskervilles, and so as he searches it, he starts to doubt it a bit, but at the same time, he gets some clues. I guessed who the mastermind behind it was as soon as the character arrived, because they so reminded me of Count Fosco in The Woman in White. So as soon as he came, I was like, oh, he's a bit Count Fosco, it must be him. But it's supposed to be a bit of a surprise, but there you go. But it is good. It was actually written in the 60s. It's not a very, very old book, but it has a real... it really follows those Gothic tropes. And then adds all these unusual Belarusian elements that I didn't always understand. Their history seems very fucked up. The King Stakh of the title is kind of like a local Belarusian sort of populist leader who, a fictional one, who was betrayed by the ancestors of this woman. And it's essentially all about how the ruling classes, even if you sap them and take away, and even as they're decaying and disgusting and inbred and spider-like, will do everything they can to keep hold of power, and they will not let anyone have any. And that's what the book's about. But maybe our hero and heroine overcome them. Who knows? Well, I know. I read the book. I also saw the opera. I'll talk about that in a minute. So the next thing I read, I had to read it this month because it's called The Fortnight in September, and it's by R.C. Sherriff, who I first read through a Penelope book, the Hopkins manuscript. It's sort of Mr. Pooter versus the End of the World. It's great. I love it. And so this one is literally a fortnight in September. A family go on holiday to Bognor Regis. They have a lovely time. Everything goes well for them. It's sunny most of the time. They swim. They get their ideal beach hut with a little balcony on it. The eldest daughter, who's actually 20, she gets a little romance. The eldest son, who's 17 and has just started work, and he's really sort of, ugh, is this it? He gets he gets an ambition. He wants to become an architect. He's like, right, when I go back, this is what I'm going to do to make those dreams come true. The dad, he was rather sort of put under by all his life, especially not being able to rise any further in his career. But when he's on a walk by himself, he sort of realizes, oh, well, I've done pretty well. I started off, kicked out of school at 14 as a manual labourer, and now, I've put my children through private school, and I've done all right. Okay, I could go higher, but in truth, I can't because I don't have those connections. I've gone as high as I can go, and I've done pretty well. And I love my family. My family love me, and that's it. Really, it's just this family who clearly love each other, going on holiday, and just putting their world back together before they have to face the strains again. And it's a real good book to read in September, especially if you work at a school, because you've had 6 weeks off, and now you've got to go back into the strain of it. And I tell you, it's been a bit of a strain this month. It's I can't really talk about it, but there's been some tough stuff this month. But this is all about how a little time off, the tiny things that bring you back, and one of the things is your family. So it's good. Next book I read was The Fawn by Magda Szabó. I have read all the Magda Szabós that have been coming into English. Abigail was my favourite. Then probably Catalin Street. Then The Door. Then Isa's Ballad. Then The Fawn. I did not love The Fawn. The story is very interesting and very depressing and very Magda Szabó. So there's this very famous actress, but she came from deep poverty. Though her family sort of her dad was essentially a disowned nobleman. So she grew up in great poverty, but her name is linked to riches. So now it's the communist era, and she's actually really heavily sort of praised for mucking in with the common people, even though actually she was more common than most of them. And sort of the symbol of her tough childhood for her is this woman called Angela, because Angela was the golden child. She had everything going right for her. She was beautiful. She was successful at lessons. She was rich and everything, and she was nice. And she was nice in main character's eyes because nothing bad ever happened to her. Nothing ever tested her, and as a result, she hates this Angela. Hates her so much that when something bad does happen to the family, she gets up at 4 a.m. to sneak off to go watch them being dispossessed out of their house in the hope of seeing Angela upset, and is really angry when she isn't. And so her whole thing is to ruin Angela's life because of what Angela represents to her. It's a tale of extreme hatred, and as such, it's very gripping Magda Szabó kind of stuff. But the way it's told is a main character who, I don't know why I've forgotten her name, Esther. Esther is walking home and sitting and reminiscing, and so it goes from her walking home to things she's reminiscing, and she's also reminiscing them to somebody, and so it's all second person really. It's you, and it goes up and down, and goes you, and it's just hard to get a hold of. I never quite felt it. Always felt kind of slippery, like I wasn't properly following it. I think I did. I think I got all the bits, but I never felt comfortable reading it, and not in a, oh, this is hot, not in a psychologically uncomfortable, just a, oh, this is a bit of a strain. I've got to really concentrate, and I don't think I need to concentrate this much for this story, So yeah, it's probably my least favourite of hers, actually, but it's still alright. Now, the last book I read was I have to read one of these. Naomi Mitchison. It's called To the Chapel Perilous. It's, in fact, the blurb of this that made me go, right, I want to read her. And it's set just at the climax of the Grail quest in King Arthur, to the end of Arthur's kingdom. But it has two really interesting ideas. One, what if there were newspapers there and they were recording it? So our main two characters are newspaper people, one from a broadsheet, which is edited by Merlin, and one from a tabloid, which is edited by the devil. And so they've been following all the Grail quests, and they've got to know each other, and there's a romance there. But the other big thing is, what if everybody who's ever got the Grail in versions of King Arthur's stories did get the Grail? So there's actually 8 Grails, and 8 Grail Knights, and they all do different things, and they've all quested it for different things, and so they go around confirming all the Grails. Yet the newspapers won't take that story. It's too complicated, and it implies that the Grail isn't as special, or that everybody's got their Grail, or something like that. And they don't want to put this message forward. And so they've got to write it up in ways that emphasise sort of the party line. And both newspapers agreed the party line is that Galahad gets the Grail. And so then they've now got to work out, how do we spin these other things? Because there's all these magic plates that knights are coming home with saying it's the Grail. And there's tons of fun little in-jokes, especially related to Grail lore and stuff like that. And if you're interested in King Arthur and this story, it's a really good take on it. It's really enjoyable and really funny. If you're not interested in it, it's going to be rather confusing, I think, but I loved it. That was that. And that was the end of the books. So, plays. So, is this the first one I saw? Sorry. I'm sure I saw something before this. Oh, the first one I saw. The first one I saw was King Stakh's Wild Hunt, the Belarusian opera. I'm so glad I read the book, because I wouldn't have had a single clue what was going on if I'd just seen the opera. It made no sense. Stuff that happened in the book that made sense was made nonsensical in the opera. So there's a bit where these two people have a duel in a darkened barn and they can't see each other. They've got 3 shots. This was represented in the play by them having pipes in their mouth with candles in, and they walked around a stage and they had 3 cups, and when they threw a cup, a light went tsh, and that was representing the gun. Why didn't they have guns? I don't know. But what the opera did do very well was cool images and atmosphere. So there was the bit where the blue lady ghost sort of floated. I'm like, is there a real person in that? And then in the interval, there were 3 women on these big poles, like if you've seen Fury Road, those sort of things that they stand on. They were on that with all this sort of musliny stuff shining, and that was really cool. So there's a character in King Stakh's Wild Hunt is always described in terms of his hands, and so the actor had these big red hands, which if you hadn't read the book would have made no sense, and he was killed by people with bigger black hands who were that was very cool. And his little brother was played by the scariest ventriloquist doll you've ever seen. So yeah, it was a very enjoyable evening, because I knew what was going on, but had I not, I would have just sat again. Huh? Well, I get it. They're in a Gothic castle, and there's a hunt and there's a mystery. But what? Even in the book, some of the reasoning behind some of the characters' actions don't quite make sense. Not to me, anyway. So this was emphasised in the opera. The thing I saw after that was this one, Compositor E. So it was about the making of the first folio. There's a guy called John Leeson. He was a teenager. He works in the Jagged print shop, where he very quickly rises to become a compositor. And what they're compositing is Shakespeare's first folio. And he has a problem. He's doing Macbeth, and he has some sort of deal about witches. We find out that his mum was killed for witchcraft. And actually, because he was from Pendle Hill, it would imply she was one of the Pendle witches. Which, seeing as John Leeson was a real person, and the Pendle witches were real people, they weren't really linked in any way in real life, but... And there were three characters. There was him, there was Jagged, they're both historical, and there's a guy called Richard Bardolph, who is not historical, but he was like a diva compositor and a poet. And all three characters had tragic backstories, and they spent a lot of time just sort of shouting, and they felt like people in a play. They just sort of shouted at each other, and they all have philosophical thoughts about how wonderful words are and stuff. It wasn't very good. Especially the philosophy, like the Jagged guy was supposed to be a go-getter who isn't really that into the art, but he occasionally just stops and waxes poetical about how wonderful words are. What's more, Compositor E was not a brave conveyor of Shakespeare's word. He's E because of the 5 compositors of the first folio. He's the one that made the most mistakes. He fucked it up. He did the tragedies, and as a result of his fuck-ups, the whole first folio is sort of known to be not a very accurate copy, and scholars for about 300 years have been trying to work out what were probably Shakespeare's words, the ones he put down, partly because this guy made so many mistakes. So at the end, when he had a 5-minute long rhyming monologue about the beauty of words and his important fingerprint on them, the guy was a doofus. The real guy was a bungler. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And also, the fingerprint, really? Fingerprints are such a modern conception. Like, from fingerprint technology. Like, really? Fingerprint? And they also talked about mental health. Really? In the 17th century? It was a mess. I didn't like it very much, as you might have guessed. The next thing I saw on this Friday, just gone. It was called Oubliette. And I didn't really understand what it was going to be about, which is one of the reasons I picked it. It was about a person locked in an oubliette. And he was lucky for a person locked in an oubliette, because there was somebody else there called Jasper. And they imagined things to pass the time. And more people got added to the oubliette. And things got bigger and stranger. And also, he wasn't just with Jasper, he was with the voices in his own head, which were trade buddies too, sort of. They looked like Susie Sue type people, and they contorted and did things. And there was music. It was a musical. They sang songs about poo sticks. And, time periods were mixed up in this, but it was an allegory, really. And so, our main character was very romantic. He believed in love, and he believed in the power of the imagination. And what was really fascinating is essentially the play's conclusion was that love and the power of imagination are just not enough if you're trapped in a tiny cage. It was really good. And it was at a place called The Space in the Isle of Dogs, which I was like, I don't want to go there. That's a real pain in the arse. But The Space is a really nice space. I had a very tasty and not too expensive tuna cheese toasty in the cafe/bar above, and the people who were there, the locals, were really nice, and I started having a lovely chat with them. I felt sorry to leave them to go and see the play, and the play was good. It was all great. Right, the last thing I saw last night. It's called Tromp L'Oeil. Tromp L'Oeil. It was that. So, in no part of the poster or the stuff sent to the press or the website does it say that this is about Donald Trump. In fact, it says it was a queer love story about with themes of surrealism, and that's why I went, because I wanted to see all these fun surrealist things on stage. It mentioned Dali and Magritte, and I wanted to see that. I wanted to see surrealism on stage with music and campness, but instead it was Trump. It was about Trump and Trump's presidency, and there was a queer love story in it. There was a Republican and a Democrat, and the Democrat was a trans woman, and they fell in love under, the auspices of Trump. And I didn't want to go and see a Trump play. I wouldn't have signed up for a Trump play. I'm not interested in a Trump play. Somebody doing the old Trump impression, orange face, little white circles, little hands, going all that Trump stuff. It was like, for a start, it's old hat. People have been doing that since 2015 at least. But the songs were good. It was, and the costumes were great, and the performers were giving it all. What they were in was, but they gave it such a, it was more fun to watch than it should have been. But the whole time I was like, I didn't want to see a Trump play. Just say it's a Trump play, and I wouldn't have gone to see it. The other thing, which just irritates me really, is a lot of the songs had like word plays. There was lipograms and anagrams, and there's one where I can't even work out what this means, but they put up the lyrics and they picked some and they did that, and it looks a bit like a cock. And the fact is, if your clever lyrics are so clever that you need to explain them in the program, then they're not really very theatrical, are they? So yeah, bit of a downer for me, that one. But that was September. I read a whole lot of books. I enjoyed The Living Dead Girl. I enjoyed it in the fact it was gripping. So I was gripped by them all to a certain extent. Saw some plays. Usual stuff really, but all good. We'll see what next month is. I will also see what next week is, but I won't tell you about it till the end of the month. So there.